It's a good time here. It's a good time here. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the EVE collab with Jabuda and I. In this video, I attempt to bring a fuel module into orbit around EVE in order to bring the existing orbit of both the station and the habitation module into a preferable orbit that is lower around EVE. If you haven't seen part 1 and part 2, you should probably check it out. Part 1 is on Jabuda's channel and part 2 is on my channel. I will leave links for those in the description. I am also happy to announce that starting from now on, we are also going to do the collab with Denshi Space Program. If you haven't seen Denshi Space Program's YouTube channel, you should probably check it out. It's really cool. He's got some really cool stuff, and I can't wait to see what he has to add to this series. So what you're looking at on screen right now is the launcher for the fuel module that I'm trying to add to the EVE station. Now, as you might imagine, this fuel module is incredibly heavy considering that it has full tanks and everything, and it has a bunch of nuke engines on it in order to bring it over from Kerbin to EVE. Because of this, I had to use like 8 5-meter tanks on the sides, and then 8 more on top of those. Once we made it into space, the fairings could be jettisoned, revealing all of the different tanks and engines, which will be used to push itself into EVE orbit and to move the existing crafts that are in EVE orbit into the desired EVE orbit. I said EVE orbit a lot. Speaking of which, we are now making the transfer burn, which will allow us to get to EVE orbit in the first place. I am using McJeb in order to help me do this. Don't judge me. It makes it a lot easier, especially when I'm trying to do a bunch of other stuff in the background. And honestly, it can just make micromanaging long burns and other tedious aspects in the game just less stressful by not having to micromanage them so much. I opted to do this transfer burn in 2 stages. The first one uses the rest of the fuel in the launcher stage, and the second one entirely uses the nukes. If you take a look at the module, you can see that it is separated into 2 different stages, all with the NERV atomic rocket motors on them. The first stage is there to mainly do the transfer burn and the capture burn at EVE in order to get it into a stable orbit. And the second one is pretty much just a bunch of engines strapped onto the actual module that will be docked with the station, and those are going to be used to, once the thing docks with the station, it's going to push it into a lower orbit. Right now we're just wrapping up the end of the transfer burn, and once that's done and we are on a clear trajectory to EVE, it's just important that we make some fine adjustments so that our orbits intercept the existing orbits. That way we can actually capture with the modules that we're trying to capture with. Once I made the necessary corrections, I burned the engines, and when I got to EVE orbit, I made even more corrections so that I could actually rendezvous with the module. So then I started my capture burn around EVE. The first module that I'm going to rendezvous with is the actual station core that Jabuda put in orbit in part 1. And then once I dock with it, I'm going to lower my orbit to match with the habitation module that I brought in part 2, and I'm going to rendezvous with it and dock with it, and then I'm going to bring everything into the desired orbit around EVE with an inclination close to 0 degrees and about an orbital altitude of about 250 kilometers above sea level. Once the station was in range, I started the process of rendezvousing and then docking with it, which wasn't that difficult because the station core is pretty compact and it's a manageable form factor, size, shape, etc. So this part wasn't that bad. Now, docking with the habitation module, that was a different story. But for now, you can see that I am successfully docked with the core, making sure to quick save it, of course. And if you actually take a look, you'll notice that I actually put some heat shields on the fuel module because I was planning on possibly aero braking, but then after looking at the orbits again, I just decided not to. So those are pretty much just dead weight. Anyways, now it is time to dock with the habitation module, which I put up in the last video. The orbits are not exactly identical, so this is going to take a lot more delta V to make it over there, but again, I planned on it. A bunch of fuel tanks on there, in addition to the fuel tanks that I want to have on the station for purposes of refueling. But as you can see, I make it, and then I get in range, and it is time to rendezvous. And this is where things get kind of weird. Keep in mind, my PC is only running at like 20 FPS when I do all of this, just because of the high part count. But supposedly 1.8 is actually supposed to improve the computing power of the game, so whenever you have ships with large part counts, it shouldn't lag as much, and you should be able to get a higher frame rate. Hopefully that's true. I would like to get 1.8 installed soon to be able to do the series on. I'm just waiting for some of the mods such as Kerbal Engineer and McJab and mods like those to work. But as you can see, I docked with the station and it worked out. So this part actually wasn't as hard as I was saying it was. It's actually the transfer of the stage. Moving the stage to the lower orbit. That's the hard part, just because it wobbles around so much. Even then, it's not that hard, but as you can see, it's just look at that. It's like, bruh. Yeah, I mean, I know it's time accelerated, like the video, you can see it, but like, that's not natural. That should not be like that. And then you got things spinning around just because of the different rotors that are on there. And I even tried turning the brakes on, but like it's still spun around a lot. And yeah, it's pretty whack, but whatever, I guess it works. Even though this was happening, I continued to just lower the orbit as normal, which I did, and I ended up getting the lowered orbit which I wanted. And then after that, I proceeded to make the inclination a little bit closer to 0. Alright, this is just getting really crazy. Like, bro, what the heck? Like, look at this. I'm trying so hard to keep it centered on the maneuver node, and it's just doing all this. And look how fast that science module on the end of that thing is spinning. Like, oh my god. I'm surprised the thing didn't break. Once I had finally made it into the desired orbit, I jettisoned all the boosters because I no longer needed them, and now you can finally see what the fuel module alone is supposed to look like. It's just a couple of orange tanks strutted on there with some extra docking ports. It's nothing really special, but it gives extra liquid fuel oxidizer and monopropellant, and I even put xenon gas tanks in there for if we want to refuel probes with it or something like that. Now, you may notice there's one problem. The habitation rings? Yeah. What I tried to do was I tried to spin the thing really fast to straighten them out, but then this happened.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
It's a good time here. It's a good time here. So I don't think there's really much I can do about it. I tried looking into it. I tried messing around with it. I tried looking up on the forums to see like what happens when joints like this get messed up, and apparently there's just nothing you can do about it. The problem obviously happened when I was doing the burns from the fuel module to move the habitation module into the preferred orbit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna abandon the current habitation module, bring up a new one, dock it, probably just put more struts in there to make sure that it doesn't get messed up. And yes, I used auto strut and it still just got messed up like this. So I don't know what to say. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you didn't, you can dislike it. If you really enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you really enjoyed it, check out Jabuta's channel and also check out Gen C Space Program's channel. Thanks for watching.